The garden season has come to an end, and it's time to tuck everyone in for a long winter's nap. Container gardening requires a little bit of special care, so let me show you how I get the season wrapped up. And let's start with my raspberry bush. This bush is 4 years old, and it was really prolific this year. I got a lot of berries, which I ate as soon as they were ripe. But the canes are spent, so I'm going to cut them back so they're just a little taller than the rim of the bucket. Removing these dead canes prevents disease, and it also helps the plant produce a maximum number of berries next season. Then I'm going to top up the soil just so that it reaches below the rim of the bucket. One thing about container gardening is that the soil is going to always leach out from the drain holes, and they have to be topped up. So I usually top up the buckets in the fall right before the cold weather hits, and that also helps to insulate the roots and keep them safe during the winter months. And before it gets too cold, I also have to repot my apricot trees. I planted these from seed in 2021. I got the apricots from Trader Joe's. I started out with 6 trees and now I'm down to 2. So I want to make sure that these guys are going to survive the winter. They were planted in trash cans from the Dollar Tree, but they're a little too big now. In fact, one of them had a taproot growing into one of the holes in the bottom of the trash can. So I'm replanting them in cat litter buckets, and then they'll have a little bit more room to grow. And again, the roots will be insulated a little bit more than they were in those trash cans. And then I had this little volunteer tree, which I'm pretty sure is an apple tree, but it does need a new home. I scooped it out of the garden in the spring and I put it in this pot just to be temporary, and now I need to plant it. So I'm going to go ahead and plant it in the pot that was left over from the apricot tree. This comfrey plant is also ready for one last harvest, and I only grow this plant to fertilize my other plants. And I'm going to use the leaves in 2 ways today. The first way is to cut the leaves and put them in a jug with water. It makes an awesome liquid fertilizer, even though it stinks like the Jersey Turnpike. And you can see here that it turns brown over time, and it'll even get black the longer it ferments. And my tomatoes love it. I'm also going to take the leaves and use them as a mulch in the buckets so that the nutrients will leach down into the soil. And I put the leaves all around the trees that I just planted. I put them around my grapes and my blueberries. And I didn't have quite enough leaves for everybody, but that's okay. This plant is going to continue to grow over the winter, and I'm always going to have some. There are some medicinal uses for this plant, but I just use it for fertilizer. It works great. And as long as I leave a few leaves on the plant when I prune it, it's going to continue to grow, and it can be aggressive. So if you want to grow this, I recommend you put it in a container. You might remember from one of my earlier videos that I planted popcorn in the garden, and it did grow, but the ears were infested with earwigs, and what the bugs didn't eat, the squirrels did. And it was funny, the squirrels did some great acrobatics on the fence trying to nibble anything within reach, and that's okay. They're fun to watch, and my cats like to watch them from the window. No big loss. I also planted this cabbage on St. Patty's Day. That was a long time ago, but my garden only gets about 4.5 hours of direct sunlight a day, and it takes a lot more time to grow things. I ended up pickling this cabbage and canning it up. It was delicious. All right, so you can see here that all of my buckets got some fresh soil. And oh, check out this rhubarb. How cool is that? I planted this is a drywall bucket. I planted some mint in here with my rhubarb, and both are doing great. They do need to be separated, but for now they're fine. You can see here that the mint is even growing out of the holes in the side of the bucket, and that's wild. I did manage to grow one pumpkin this year, and it did grow in a bucket. But I think it's a green one. It's not even remotely turning orange, and I'm not sure what kind of pumpkin it is because this plant was also a volunteer this year. It just sprung up in one of my buckets, so I let it grow, and recently I harvested it, and it makes a nice fall decoration in my living room. But the weather's getting colder in Denver, and we recently had our first freeze, so I had to find a way to cover my plants. In years past, I've built a shelter for the plants out of wood and covered it with poly, but I didn't want to do that this year, mainly because I found this king-size mattress cover at the thrift store. It's 3 millimeters thick and it's transparent. And of course, I paid half price for it, which was $2. And for real, I couldn't even buy a roll of poly for that. It's also shaped like a pocket, and I had an idea for a simple greenhouse using materials I already had. So I had these PVC pipes, and I've used them in the past to cover the garden bed, but this year I'm going to do some. I did something a little different. Once all the plants were grouped together, I used the PVC to create two arcs on either side of the grouping, and then just slip the mattress cover right over it. It's the most simple greenhouse I've ever made. Oh, and grouping the plants together also allows them to stay warm. Sometimes I even surround the jugs with jugs of water. I surround the buckets with jugs of water just to help insulate when it's really cold. But for now, this contraption is working pretty good. It gets really hot inside during the day, or, when I go out in the morning. The condensation is crazy. So it's usually above 50 degrees outside during the day, and I'll peel that plastic back a little bit to let it air out in there because the last thing I want is a mold problem. The only potential issue with this greenhouse is the tops of my apricot trees. They're kind of bent over, but I'll figure it out. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope I'm leaving you inspired. And until next time, bye.